What's up, Ramblers? Your favorite CEO is back. And before we begin today's podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode. And follow Assistance HQ and Offsource HQ across all platforms to stay up to date on the latest content, updates, and more. And remember, if you need a virtual assistant, visit us at offsource.tech. Now, before we begin, a word from our sponsor. Hey guys, welcome back to another wonderful episode of The Ramblings. I have with us today Leah Zimmerman. She is a coach of all things, most particularly business. And so how are you doing today, Leah? Introduce yourself. Give us some background.
Some background. There's so many different stories that I can use to tell who I am. Maybe that's the first thing that I'll share is your story can always be changing, and I've changed mine so many times. So I'll start with who I am now. Right now, as I sit with you, I am sitting at a desk in my townhouse, a condo in Southern California.
And that's very nice.
Yeah, it is kind of nice. It's in the 90s in the middle of the afternoon, but the air conditioning is great and it cools down in the evenings, not too humid. I'm walking distance from a bunch of college campuses in Claremont. My husband's a professor at one of the UC schools. And right now is out with my two daughters, 14 and 19. And I live here, and I have started in recent years coaching, which is a culmination of things like so many things in my life have led me to this place. My focus is helping people have conversations that become more meaningful, that have more quality. And if you think about it, we build our businesses one conversation at a time. And even whether it's transactional or whether it's strategic or whether it's relational, these are all conversations that we're having. And so I help business owners have better conversations. And it especially comes up when there's conflict in family businesses. And that's my particular specialty, because where there's conflict and people are in disagreement, it means something really matters. And if something really matters, then there's the equal potential for connection and deepening relationships as much as friction and tension and the separation that happens because people are in conflict. So helping people through that conflict, see other perspectives and be able to come together into some kind of connection, more harmony, and more of a viable working relationship is really what I love to do.
That's very unique. So I'm going to dive right into some heavy hitting questions, like off the rip, right? So what are small business owners thinking? What are their conversations like? So in identifying how to change the conversation, what are the conversations a lot of small business owners are having right now?
Right. So let's help people recognize the kinds of conversations that they're having. And especially if you're a business owner, there's often the conversation you're having in your head about that employee who just screwed up or who could be doing something better. And the person you have to tell, why are they doing that? And then there's the conversation you have with yourself that you don't want to tell anybody about, that you're a little nervous, that there's self-doubt. Is this going to really happen? There's the anger and the frustration you feel that's coming out of that, whether you're acknowledging yourself or whether you're taking it on the other people. There may be the conversation that you're having with your child who you really think should take over the business, or the opposite. You don't want them to go in the business, go to school, do something else, but they want to be in the business, but you're not sure they're even good enough to be in the business. And will this get done or will that get done? And so always thinking about, how is this going to happen? Who's going to take care of this? Where is the next thing coming from? Will this work? What's happening in the economy? What's changing around here? What are my competitors doing? These questions, and living constantly in a state of uncertainty. And these conversations, I think, is fair to say that most business owners are somewhere, small business owners are somewhere in there, varying degrees. And so when I work with a client, I'm either working with the client on the conversations they're having with themselves. One I often will say is the way you talk to yourself. Would you stay working for a boss who talked to you that way?
Wow. I haven't never even thought of that question, because I think that with the way a lot of bosses talk to other people is a reflection on how they talk to themselves. And Sometimes you do
Absolutely.
hear negative conversations amongst people talking to just themselves. I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this. And it's a very negative conversation with just
Right.
themselves. And I think that
Right.
relates or correlates with
Absolutely.
how they're treating other people, mainly employees in the businesses. How do you change that kind of conversation? Like if someone's having a bad conversation with themselves, who do you focus on to change the
And the
conversation?
conversation, first of all, you start to recognize that that's what's happening. Notice the times you're saying to yourself, oh my God, you screwed up. What kind of stupid are you? Or the way you go, I don't know if I can do it. I have all this to do. I'm so overwhelmed. I never get things done. What's the conversation that's the one you tend to have? And notice the voice and recognize it as the voice of some. And I work with clients, I let them name that voice to themselves. So some of them will call it the judge, the critic, the bad boss. I had one call it gremlin. I had one call it Oscar the Grouch. what what's that? Who's that voice? And often we'll start to recognize, where did we internalize talking to ourselves that way? Because there's a reason we talk to ourselves that way. We're wired to notice negativity. And as we're growing up, for many of us, the adults in our lives are trying to keep us safe. And the way they try to keep us safe is protecting us from the things they fear. Stay here, don't go over there. But we don't understand the danger. We just know to think the way they're thinking. That way I'll be ahead of all that criticism or all that judgment, or we build our behaviors and our own communication around the messages that are coming into us from the way people talk to us. And then we end up picking up a lot of those scripts. So that's what I call it. These are old scripts. An example, I remember walking home I give this story all the time because my mom's great example for repeating scripts. Come off the bus. I'm tired. It's been a long day. It's a heavy door as I walk in. And all I want to do is put myself down and be home. And my mom yells from the kitchen, don't leave your backpack over there. Take it upstairs. And you know what I did every time? I didn't have the energy to take it upstairs. I just put it somewhere almost near the stairs, just so she wouldn't, feel like I totally ignored her. And I think I did it the same. I think she did the same thing every day, and I did the same thing every day. And always, of course, when I'm coming in, I'm not doing it well. I'm not doing it right. Then later in the day, Leah, I told you, blah, blah, blah. Or if it wasn't me, it was my brother, it was my sister. We're familiar with these kinds of conversations that repeat over and over. When we're repeating and we're having repetitive conversations that follow a script, we're not really communicating. So we want to try to recognize the scripts we're following for ourselves. What are the things we repetitively say to ourselves? What are the things we repetitively say to others? And then think, what is it? So we identify that and become aware of the patterns, and then say, what is the thing I'm really trying to make happen here? So for my mom, she really just wanted, she's the maintenance. I want everything to look nice. I'm managing things, should go where they're supposed to go. And I think for her, that was, if I'm a good mom and I'm a good housekeeper, that's what's happening.
Right.
Right. But I didn't get any of that. All I got was what she wanted of me and the demands on me. So how different would it be if I'd walked in the door and my mom could come over to me and say, hi, Leah, welcome home from school, and give me a hug and say, I know you're tired, but could you take your backpack up to your room before you come in for some food? I'll have something out for you. It's relational, it's connected, it's generous, and I would have responded really differently, right? But she couldn't do that because her head was everywhere and all the things that she had to do. There was going to be carpooling that had to happen, there was dinner that had to happen. So all she's thinking about is just getting stuff done. Right.
Right.
And all I'm thinking about is, I want a hug from my mom. I just came home from school and but I don't know how to say that. So instead I get grouchy and she gets grouchy, and we're not really saying what we need. So the next thing to do after you identify the patterns is, what's the thing you really want? And what would it sound like to ask for it? And we don't like to ask for it because, oh, then I'm weak. I'm asking for help. Mom, I just need you to love me. Who was ever going to say that, Mom? But but if we say that, Mom, when I come home, could you give me a hug before you tell me to bring that upstairs? Would my mom have said no to giving me a hug? I doubt it. If I'd gone in and put it down, gone in to say, hi, Mom, and realized that I could give her a smile and a hug for her day. And then said, Mom, is it okay if I take it up later? I just need to eat something first. Probably a whole different conversation, right? But we don't really know how to identify the things we're really feeling, the things we really want for ourselves or from others. And so it comes out in these same scripts, and the scripts lead us to just having the same disagreements and conflicts over and over. I said a lot there, so I must have answered the
No,
question somewhere.
that's very good. So I guess that leads me to a very, I guess, quick follow-up question, which would be, once you recognize like what your script is, or if you have a script, right? The other person may not have that same realization. So how do you, I guess, if you were the mom or the child in either situation, in this
Yeah.
case, with a child, how do you get your mom to be on the same page as you once you realize, or if it's the mom, how does she get the daughter
Yeah.
to be on the same page to realize? Is there a conversation that has to happen beforehand? Like, how do
Great
we?
questions. So I call that first stage calibration, when you realize what's at stake for you. And I recommend thinking about what's at stake for the other person. And that's something I help my clients figure out. The next step is connecting. And if you think about how to set the intention to connect, most of the time we go in with an intention to say the things we needed to say, to convince the person of the thing we need to convince, to change their behavior in some way or another. But if we set the intention to connect first, that shifts the whole dynamic. And that's the example I gave. If I go in and I say, I'm going to connect with my mom. So I work with a lot of next gen clients who are making those changes with their parents, because if they show up as a leader, they can change the dynamic, even if their parents haven't changed. And this happened in my family. My husband came with me, wasn't my husband yet, or maybe he was, but we were very, very young. And he comes to my house for dinner, and I get into the same kind of conversational pattern I had with my dad, where I bring up a topic, my dad argues with me, he always knows better, puts my ideas down, puts his ideas up, and I don't feel so good. And I'm trying to argue to be heard. And my husband said to me, you don't have to have those conversations if they make you uncomfortable. And I had never thought about that. I had never thought that I don't have to have those conversations. And in some ways, I realized that was the relationship I had with my dad, was to have those conversations. But I made the choice to not have those conversations, not answer my dad in the same pattern. So I shifted the way I answered in those conversations, and they went in a whole nother direction. And I missed them for a little while. And I think he did too, because but we found other ways to connect that made me feel better, that did not make me feel put down. And over time, I realized not to feel put down by my dad. He's not putting me down. He's talking about himself. And that's another thing, is it's usually not about you, but
Wow.
deciding to connect is the
I
first.
have a very personal relationship with that particular aspect, only because me and my dad have a very similar kind of relationship in that aspect. Who has to be the person to recognize first?
It doesn't matter. The person who has the most pain is the one I usually am working with. And it's often the younger one, because we don't think we can change our parent. They are who they are. This is how they talk to me. I wish they would change. I wish they would see me. I wish they would hear me. I wish they could understand me. The way we fight for those things is always from that place of the one who has lesser power. We're always stuck in that status. So the way I work with my clients is to help them find that leadership. And it's the difference between, Dad, now listen, I have a really good idea. No, Dad, you're not getting it, to, okay, Dad, sit down. I have an idea. Before you respond, I need you to listen. Here's what I think might work. Now just listen and don't answer right away. You have to guide them through whatever it is you want, however it is that's going to help you to be heard. And it's really different for every client, what's going to make that change. But you show up differently, whether it's in your voice, your body, your intention, the thoughts, the beliefs, all of these things make up who you are and how you show up. You show up as a leader and a guide, and they will change. It might not happen right away, and you might even get pushback first. but eventually everything will change. And this is how I have created the relationships in my life and have incredibly peaceful, loving relationships in my family. It's not all my credit. There's definitely a strong value on that in my family, but I've had to lead the way and set my own boundaries and develop the conversations that I want to have, and sometimes stand up for myself in order to do that. So I speak not only from a coach, but this has been my life, how to be heard and how to speak in a way that is empowering, but not overpowering. Because I want to be my dad. I mean, I love my dad. But the way my dad felt to me as a child, as in that authoritarian stance, was not who I wanted to be as a teacher. And so I struggled to find my authority because I would pull back from not wanting to be that. So I had to really confront these thoughts and these feelings in order to be the adult who could stand in front of the room, advocate for my students, but still set the limits, still tell them, no, you can't do that. You have to sit down. Wow. Without being, no, you have to sit, or I'm exaggerating, but
you're not. I can feel you're not. You don't have to say it's you're not exaggerating. I can feel like, right. No, that's how they are in that situation.
Well, I was 10 when I said, I think I was 10. I might have been a little younger, a little older. And my parents, the thing they did that was great was they said, when you're an adult, you can do it your way. I started planning my way right away. I had a journal. I started planning my way. Okay, children can get to have a voice. There was a show called Wonderama when I was little. You can go look it up. And they used to have the song Kids Are People Too. And I was little, so it was like 5, 6, 7 years old. So it's early 70s. And I was like, yes, somebody understands it. Because I didn't feel like I was treated like I was a person too. I felt like I was treated like I was a kid. Right. And I thought there was something about that just wasn't right. And I had an affinity for working with children. And I ended up with this, by the time I finished college, I had a resume of doing a million things with kids and education and stuff like that. So I went into teaching and I learned how to be the teacher I had wanted and the adult and parent I had wanted, and reparented myself. And once I did that, then I could go do the things I'd really wanted to do, which was to be an actress in the theater. And so then I did that for a while. And then I wanted to be a mom. So then I did that. And then I needed to work, and I loved the leadership role. So I took on some educational positions. Mm-hmm. And mostly I stepped into caring about leadership and cultivating leaders. That led me to coaching. And all of that has been about communication. So
that's amazing.
Thank you. My life has been about, this is the thing I would say, we were talking about before about what are the nuggets that people can learn. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we get caught up on what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to present in the world? The choices that I've made in my life, and I think I just feel blessed with the naivete that I had around it and the privilege I had to pursue what I wanted, is that I thought about who's the person I want to be in the world. And it's a different question.
Wow. I apologize for my audience. I'm going to get super hyper personal because there are a lot of people, apparently because there's 2 people on a podcast having the similar feeling in this particular direction I want to go.
Yeah.
For someone who's younger, primarily like a child or something, what is the path to being heard? Because a lot of times that can affect how we as adults communicate with other people and everything of that nature, and how, we allow other people to voice their opinions to us. What is the best way, or in your opinion, in your particular circumstances, in your, learnings, what is the most efficient way for someone who is younger? Someone of myself, I'm 23, turning 24, and my dad's almost 60. So he's a pretty good significant amount older than me and everything of that nature. And I'm sure a lot of people experience it. What does it take to really, I don't want to necessarily, I use the word, to mend the relationship of, 18, 19, 20 plus years of feeling that you're not being heard, and still understanding like, oh, that's my dad or that's my parent, and I want to be close with them and I want to have a relationship with them.
Yeah.
But I don't have to have a conversation with them. I'm 19. I no longer have to actually engage in a conversation, but I would like to, because I understand that that's my parent. what is it like for someone in that particular situation? How do they mend that relationship or get the parent to really, I guess, somehow feel like they're being heard?
The first thing that seems to be most common in my clients, and again, without really coaching somebody and hearing something more specific, it's as general, is to be willing to accept that you might not get the approval or something you're looking for. Because most of us, when we're that age and when we're young, we're looking for something. Don't you see me? Will you approve of me? We want that approval. When we let go of needing that from our parents and we know what we can offer them, the relationship changes. And when we, in every relationship, I recommend like my AAA, AAA for roadside service. I call it AAA for relationship service. And the first is to acknowledge, Dad, you really worked hard. Dad, you're home late. You must have had a lot. Whatever it is, just see, hear, acknowledge anything about them. It's huge when we feel seen and heard. Do it for them. Anything you want, you can give, and you will eventually get. The second is affirming. Well, that sounds hard, but you've really worked hard to build this life that you have. Whatever it is they feel, give it empathy. Let them know you see, you understand them. Now you see, hear, and understand. I feel you. I share with you. The last thing, and this is the hugest thing, what our parents really want to feel from us is appreciated. I really appreciate how hard you worked so I could have the education that I had, so I could have the opportunities that I had. So I went to an elite college and graduated debt-free. I had no sense of the privilege of that until later. And I'm like, wow, I really appreciate that that mattered to you and that you worked your butt off so that I wouldn't have to carry debt in my life. That meant I could be an actress. That didn't have to worry about paying my college loans. And you can see that means something to me. How do we show that appreciation to our parents? Those are the three things. So we want to let go of the approval of what we think, recognize what you're looking for. What's the answer you're not getting that's frustrating you?
Right.
What can you start giving? And then I know I had one other thing I was going to say. Forgiveness. And where I go with this is not everyone is religious, but most of us know that one of the commandments is honor or respect your parents. And it depends how you translate that from the Hebrew. It's kabed et avicha v'et imecha. Honor. It's really, the word is really more, I think honor
Praise
stands
and honor to your parents.
a little better. Honor your parents. When I was told that as a child, I was like, well, fine, they have to honor me. And I'm going to tell you, this is not written for children. This is written for an adult. The way you do that, the way you honor and respect your parent, and I think it's really honor, is you forgive them for what makes them human. And you recognize that anything they've said and done, it wasn't about you. It was about their hopes and dreams, their idea of who they're supposed to be as a parent, their idea of what they want from you, their fears about the world for you. And when you can see that and give them that forgiveness, and it's practice. It's not like, oh, I forgive them and now I'm all good. And I have a book right here I'm going to share with you. I'd recommend reading this, and to anybody who's in a similar situation. This is by my friend Octavio, and it's called It Was a Beautiful Day When My Father Died. His father was abusive, angry. He didn't talk to him for 20 years before his father died. But he describes the moment that he found that forgiveness after his father had gone and what it changed in his life.
I'm definitely gonna have to have a copy of that book.
I
Is it
recommend
on
it, and I'm
Amazon?
happy to
Where
put
can
you
I
in.
find it? I would love to find a copy of that book.
Yeah, I think that a lot of second generation people will identify with it. Is the immigrant father. It's Latino family. Yeah, it's on Amazon. And it's a beautiful day when my father died. I highly recommend it. And it's a beautiful, honest book about forgiveness. I think I might have a spot highlighted. Until 14 years ago, the fifth commandment made no sense to me. How does one honor a father who is so contemptible? Here's how. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is the freedom from your past that allows you to reinterpret your past. Oh, you can recall what really sucked. but it no longer has a hold on you. When we let go of that past that we have with our parents, and we can see them as the flawed human individuals that they are, and we can show up more as God's angels, more as humans who have love and generosity and something to share, and we give that, and it might not be appreciated. If we're looking for the appreciation and the approval, then we're not there yet. But when we can do it, no longer looking for those things, and be there for them. So when my mom yells at me in her kitchen, Leah, don't put that there. That's where she has control still. And as my mother's now 79, turning 80 in the fall.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We have, between us, me and my husband, 4 parents who will be in their 80s. And we are incredibly grateful and thankful. Yeah. Like I said, I lots of privilege and charm and blessings in my life. But I stand in my mom's kitchen, that's something she still has control over, right? So I could fight her. I could say, Mom, you can't talk to me that way. Or Mom, I was just putting it over here. But it's not about that. It's about, Mom, what's bothering you? What should I do? How would you like me to help? Because now it's my turn to take care of her. Now it's my turn to help her feel at ease and do what I can. Mostly what I can is just stay out of the kitchen. My sister's much better with her and knows her kitchen much better. I try to just steer clear. But when she says, Leah, it doesn't go here, it goes there. It's not my job to say, Mom, like I would have as a child, you can't talk to me that way. Or, I'm a grown up. I have my own house. I'm in my 50s, God's sake. Pay, that's not mine to say. It's mine to say, okay, Mom, where would you like it to go? And if I show up that way, she changes. She relaxes.
Wow, this is a lot of knowledge. Right, this is so like, oh my gosh, I'm being blown away with knowledge right now. Okay, so as this being an entrepreneur podcast, we've talked a lot about relationships and everything for like a little bit. I would like to know, how did all of this culminate and transform into a business? Because now this is what you do for money, and this is how you help other people. How did that come about?
So I, in that time that I said when I was an actress, I think I told you that I went and I pounded the pavement. So actually, I was a teacher, and I didn't have that natural authority in me. I did not want to be that authority. I was resisting it. My voice was up here. You're about your age, leading a classroom of however many kids, and I'm exaggerating. It comes across a little more LA girl like. But I had this really high Minnie Mouse voice, and luckily I had some parents in the class who cared and invited me to their workshops. And I was already interested in the performing arts. I'd been a dancer and wanted to do more talking on stage. And over the years that I worked with them, I grew this more integrated presence, my voice and my body. And I was coached in beautiful ways and watched other people be coached in beautiful ways. And they also had a coaching system that they started to use with corporate. So I always had this model of leadership and of mentorship and of coaching that I took with me into my own leadership roles. And I became really interested in leadership and was coaching a lot of that in the college students who would work with me in my educational programs that were in Jewish institutions. So it wasn't full time. And I helped them. I worked with students. I worked with families. I continued to do theater, and I grew my own leadership, and I was managing from the middle. And one of the things that I learned was when I showed up in my own alignment, if I was true in my values, then what other people said about me mattered a lot less. It was when what people said was kind of true because I betrayed my own self that I got upset. And it could be uncomfortable. And that actually happened. I stood in something that was my value. And I have lots of times thought about how I communicate different. And the reflection is one of the greatest teachers. But I don't regret the stance I took on behalf of one of my students that was against the president and his political views at the time. It cost me my job. And that was uncomfortable. But I never had that self-judgment, that regret, or any of those things. So I didn't know for sure when I went into coaching what aspect of that I was going to be able to bring to people. I just knew that I had this model and that I had worked with young leaders and that I could help them step into it. That I could help people as a performer and as a teacher and as a leader find that presence and that communication and that leadership in front of the room. Then I went to a life coaching class and I was like, oh my God, I love this. This is what I've been doing my whole life. My whole kind of way of teaching was about watching the student, asking the next question, finding out who they are and where they're going and helping guide in that direction. So I just ate it all up. And then I started doing what they recommend for life coaches to start doing, is just coach a lot of people and your niche will show up. And I started using what I know. And when I started to do workshops, I did communication, but that doesn't help people know. Step into your power, communication, who's going to show up? I called it how to have difficult conversations. That's when people started showing up. That's when family businesses started tapping me on the shoulder. And that's when I discovered that I could really talk about conversations and relationships and how to communicate in a way that was novel and different and helpful for people. And so I've learned and evolved in my business from my clients, from what they've needed and what shows up and how I serve them. And then I go, oh, this is what people need to hear, or this is the thing that people struggle with. I can talk about that.
Right.
And that's kind of how I've gotten to where I am, is this culmination of all this background in the arts. I also had a background in art history and museums in New York, and my ed degree is actually in museums. So I have the arts, whether it's as a appreciation of fine arts or participation in performing arts, but it's all communication. It's all the humanity. So I'm an expert in how to help people recognize the human element and communicate human to human. And that's comes out of everything I've done in my whole life.
Wow. That's a pretty decent transition story. So I'll ask, growing up,
Yeah.
did you always know that you were going to be in service? I won't say necessarily in business or life coaching.
It's
Did
funny.
you always know that I want to help people?
I think so. There are two stories I could tell. One made me think of, I was in a networking today and they said, one of the questions was, when you were 6 years old, what did you want to be when you grow up? And how does that show up in your life now? And I thought about, well, I knew I wanted to be a teacher, a mother, a singer, a dancer, an actress. I had a list, and they're all things that I've done in my life. So I think, oh, I forgot now you asked the question, but the other thing that came up was, when I know I wanted to do this. I don't think I knew that I had any particular standout perspective as a child. But in retrospect, there are things that came up and happened when I was 10 years old. And I recently reconnected with my 5th grade teacher. And there's a story that came out about me speaking up then, that I've always spoken up for people.
Mm-hmm.
I always worked with children and took care of them. I came from a line of teachers, a lot of New York City classroom teachers in my family, a lot of teachers in my family. My father was a physician, which is also in service. So I don't think I thought about it. I don't think I thought about service, but I think I've always been more of a helper. And I did get to a place where I didn't make that much money. And I did what I did because I loved it, because of who I was serving and building community. And so there are people who go out there and take care of money and make money. I build community. So that's the abundance in my life, is community and relationships. And it's only recent that I realized, oh, I can do that in business and make money with it.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I didn't know people would pay for that. That's kind of cool. Now I get to do some of the same things I did for Bupkis to get paid a lot of money for it.
Yeah. I mean, people at this point, they pay for a lot of things. Like, one of the craziest things, I don't want to say it's the craziest, but I think one of the weirdest or most unique ways of making money that I've seen is that there are something called professional cuddlers. And so cuddlers, they essentially live in primarily in like metropolitan areas like New York, Atlanta, Los Angeles, things like that. And essentially, if you're like a single person or someone who doesn't have like a lot of family or anything like that in that particular nature, what these people do is they come and provide companionship and cuddle you, essentially, like give you the physical touch and the need that that you're not getting from your normal family relationship, familial relationships, things of that nature?
Well, that's and I think the role that I'm playing too also comes from the I don't want to call it the complete dissolution, but the dissolving, but that we don't live in extended families anymore. Even our nuclear
Yes.
families are often separated, and we don't always know how to build relationship and connection. We're learning the wrong things in school. We're not learning the things that help us become real human. And so, but it reminds us about entrepreneurship. If someone has a problem and you can come up with a solution, you can build a business around it. The caveat to that is that when that problem no longer exists or something else in society takes care of that problem, you
You're
don't
out
have
of
that solution anymore, right? So you have to always be kind of looking. So, coaching wasn't something that existed when I was a child. It
Really?
wasn't someone, yeah, I never heard about coaching. I heard about it for the first time when I was in my 20s, and the acting studio where I was studying was doing coaching in the corporate world, but I didn't know it was a thing, and I don't even know it was a big thing then. It's grown a lot in the last some number of years, and
So I want to actually touch on that now that you say that, because there's, there clearly is like a large generational gap between me and you in that particular sense. And so I would love to learn, or at least, see from your perspective, how has that changed? Like, what have you seen that did not exist as, when you were growing up or in your early 20s and things of that nature that you now see today? So at least from my example, or from my perspective, growing up, everything was, and this is the example I will forever use. Growing up, it was always social media is not going to pay the bills. Being popular or being funny on Facebook doesn't mean anything. Being an Instagram model is not serious. Being any form of,
right.
famous or having some kind of, community, if you will, as you would put it, on social media had no value. Fast forward 10 years, now
Right.
we have Instagram models that make money because of sponsorships. Facebook comedians make money because of advertisements, and a lot of large companies now are looking at influencer marketing. And that's like growing up, influencer marketing was the people that you paid to speak at your conferences.
Right.
Now it's the people
This
that
is how fast the world is changing. I got my first computer in college when I was a senior in 1986. We had a small PC in high school. So we had to get up to go to the TV to change the channel if we wanted to watch TV when I was growing up. And my parents would say, oh, we only had black and white. And my grandparents would say, we only had radio. But, my children think that's funny. And these days a kid doesn't understand that this is talking on the phone, because a receiver doesn't look like this anymore. They do this to talk on the phone.
I saw that one time. I was like, it was like they asked a group of like people, like, act like you're talking on the phone. And, everybody went like this until it was like a certain, like a young enough kid who was like this. And I'm like, what is
And
this?
they won't
This
get
is the phone for me.
That's right. So those things are all changing. When I was graduating college, my mom, and I think this is one of the greatest pieces of wisdom that she shared with me, she said, Leah, go do what you want to do. Go do the things you really enjoy doing, because you don't know what jobs are going to be out there later. Things are changing so fast. So no one that I knew in college, and I went to college in New York City, knew to say, I want to be a coach. I'm going to be a consultant. So social media didn't exist.
Right.
Right. I remember my husband in college went away to another country. He did that abroad. And I still have the handwritten letters that he sent me. And it was only later there was another separation that was on computer. And the thing is, I don't have those emails. I never printed them out. They just stayed on the computer. But the handwritten ones I have, because I saved all of them and put them in a notebook. But I couldn't talk to him on the phone. And in college, when we talked on the phone, all our savings went to covering that. There were none of these plans where everything is just covered. And
Right.
I didn't have a phone in my room growing up. I had to go in my parents' room to use the phone, and it was connected to things with a wire. So, yeah. So, and I'm only in my 50s. So I asked my parents then what was different for them, right? And my mom remembers when the first phone they had was, I forgot what they call it, a party phone, where there were multiple families on the same phone that could be using it. I think that was in Brooklyn.
I've never
So
heard
things change things change really fast. Technology is changing really fast. So the needs, we didn't have computers at work. My first temp job was after the summer, my freshman year of college, was taking what came out of the faxes and bringing it to people. Right? They didn't have emails; they had faxes. And faxes was even like a big thing, that they had the faxes. We had the fax
Yeah.
room where we sat and we waited for things to come in. And now, so the needs and the things that come up, or the kinds of consultants and coaches that we can become, is always evolving as the new things come up. Companies are shifting, and these big corporations also, it wasn't quite so big, such a big corporate. The corporations wasn't quite the same
Mm.
as the corporate America culture. I don't think was as workaholic like as it is now. But there
Really?
was leadership coaching. Yeah, I don't think it was quite the same. I might be different with some, I might be wrong. I wasn't as connected to that, but I think that has also evolved as you have another generation of people who worked hard. Well, you get more by working hard. There's an ethic to working hard. You put in a lot. So we're going to work really hard at our jobs and prove that we're valuable. We're going to be people who are going to produce a lot. And something, we still have this idea, which is really an older idea, that I have to work extra hard, produce extra much in order to, and if I work hard, I'll get more. When we kind of know now that sometimes you need to rest just as much as you need to work.
Right. And companies now, I think that I was watching a video before, and it was talking about the waves of the previous generation and how they affect the new generation, right? And so used it to determine it by names, right? And so in like the 70s and everything, like a certain name was popular, right? You know, because all of the parents grew up hearing, you know, Sarah, Blumet, like whatever the names were. And so because they wanted unique names, it was, oh, this particular group of people grew up hearing all of these names. You know, at one point, Sarah was not a popular name. And so then eventually enough people are like, oh, Sarah's not popular. I'm going to name my child Sarah. And so then all of a sudden these kids
Yeah, the names go in
go to
generation.
school with, you know, a bunch of kids named Sarah, and they're like, I'm not going to name my kid, you know, anything normal.
Yeah.
But enough people think I'm not going to name my kid something,
Right.
you know, normal,
Right.
and then they come up with the same kind of name. And so it's like these waves of different things and how they
Yeah.
affect the new generation.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of the, I guess, work ethics, if you will. So for example, a lot of times, you know, back in the day, I don't want to say companies necessarily really took care of you, because we're not going to go that far, but they did have a much better, you know, social contract with their employees. And so whether it was through the ideas of pensions or through actual retirement plans and raises and things of that nature, it was, you know, our parents stayed at, you know, it was frowned upon to not stay at a job for a certain amount of time. He was like,
You had a job, it was like where you expected to be. You had a pension. When my father was laid off, he was about my age in the 90s, and that was a really traumatic time for people in that age range, to be laid off, because they had been at their jobs 20 plus years, 30 plus years, and they had always expected to stay at that same job. And to not have your job now for a man, and that was my life. That was the thing I did that took care of my family. That was me protecting and providing, and I don't have that. I didn't know a lot of women who lost their jobs at the time, so I can't speak to that. But my father-in-law lost his job. My uncle lost his job at that time. They ended up coming out better and stronger. But this whole idea of being someone who could bring value to multiple, being a consultant, these things didn't exist at that time. I don't know that they never existed, but independent contractors, there just wasn't as much. You got a job,
right,
in a place, and you got a pension, and you expected that to be your job for most of your space. Now people go into a job not expecting to stay, but why should you? The company's not necessarily going to try and make it
worth my while.
Right. So those are things that have definitely changed over time. My dad also said, don't be a doctor. The
Wow.
medical system really, well, the medical system was really changing. For him, he went into it about taking care of people, but so much paperwork and the insurance companies saying what you can do and what you can't do and what to pay for and what you can provide and all of those things became a whole different ballgame. He just thought, you can have a very nice life as a teacher. There's a lot more stability. They still get a pension. You don't have to work crazy hours, because he worked crazy hours. Um, so he was really supportive of me becoming a teacher and going in that direction. Becoming a performing artist, that was a whole different thing. That was huge for me. It brings me back to
I
what you
want to
said.
ask that because I think there's a lot of people, especially within, certain communities. Me being, African American, there's a lot of people that go into the entertainment industry because that's what they see other people doing.
Yeah.
Now, you having actually been in the entertainment industry, being being an actress and everything of that nature, you, I'm sure, have dealt with the blowback of your parents saying, like, the million and one chance of you actually getting to do that is very slim. And so what was your navigation of the waters like when you were
Yeah. Oh boy.
being an actress?
I was a dancer in high school, and it used to be one sentence: I want to be a dancer, but I can't. Because the expectations were so strong, and my body type was also so wrong, that I never thought it's like, I just never thought it was allowed. And so when I first knew, I mean, I kind of knew I wanted to do it, but I needed to know I could teach, and then I had that background, and I gave myself what I needed in order to be able to do it by becoming that teacher. The first time I really was able to even think the thought, I mean, I barely whispered it in my husband's ear because it was so real of what I wanted to do. It was so deep. And what I knew how to do was audition for schools. And what I thought was, you either have it or you don't. And I've always been told I was a good performer and I had great characterizations in my work. So I must have it. I'm going to go audition and I'll get into something. And there wasn't a lot of community theater I'd done. I really just went cold auditioning for graduate schools. And I had no idea the kind of background people really come from when they audition for that, or that they've done it already in college. So I really was like completely naive and clueless. But I went and I did it and did not tell my parents. And we were living in Texas at the time because my husband was in graduate school there. And there were auditions in New York for graduate schools. And I didn't tell my parents I was coming to New York until about 2 days before. And I think that really surprised them. And I don't think they wanted to be left out of my life like that. So I think that may have had an impact. I doubt they remember it anymore, though, I have to say. But the thing that I discovered was my parents always were afraid for me, and they're going to do what they can to protect me. But if I show them that I can do something and I'll be okay,
Right.
they were always at every performance. They're always rooting for me. And even now when I perform, if they can come see me, they're happy to come and see me. And I never pursued all the way in the business because I wanted to be a mom. I didn't want to travel out of town. So as my career was growing and I could start getting more paid stuff, other things came of interest to me. But the other thing I'd say is that being an artist is being an entrepreneur. There's no such thing as you've got it or you don't. One of the things I realized is there are a lot of people out there as actors who suck, who have really, but they're not as artists. They're craftspeople, and they make a career because it is solving a problem that somebody wants. You have a character that somebody wants, and you know how to play it really well, or you do a particular kind of thing in the theater or with what you do, you will find an audience for it. And it's really about how willing are you to work to get to the level of excellence you need. If it's in like music or a place where you can really hear the difference, that matters. And acting, one of the things that I realized was it has to do if somebody wants you, someone who looks like you or doesn't look like you. It has somewhat to do with talent and a lot to do with marketing. And it's really a lesson in entrepreneurship. And going to auditions is not about, yes, they love me. It's no, 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 no. This one works. Yes, great. I do it. Oh, no, I didn't like that one. Okay, go again. No, no, no. And it's how many no's are you willing to go till you get the yes, which is the same in entrepreneurship too. No's are part of getting to yes. And that's the biggest lesson that I learned as an actor that I think has really served me as an entrepreneur. No means not yet, means
You hit
not
on
now.
something. that I want to expand on, because I think it was
Yeah.
something you probably didn't catch, but I've really caught it, and I want to go deeper in
Huh.
it. You mentioned that some people are an artist and some
Yeah.
people are craftsmen. Some
Yeah.
people are like the artist part, and then there are people that, how would you differentiate the
And
artist?
I think everyone might differentiate this differently, but there are people who
I didn't know
know
there was a
how to
difference.
put
By
it
the way. I just
together.
put that out there. I didn't know that there was a difference.
Here's how I think about it differently. There are people who know how to build a house so it's really sturdy and people will be happy living in it. That doesn't mean that they have really innovative or created artistic expression from it, or that they have really found a way to express humanity in new ways through it. So I think an artist is often someone who thinks of themselves as an artist, is someone who's not trying to just create and do well how to make a knife, but someone who wants to do things with metal that makes us see things, feel things differently. So some people are artists as entrepreneurs in what they create. So that's how I see it. If you're looking to express something new of humanity through your work. So what I love to do as an actress is to be able to show the realness of what we feel underneath, of what's really going on. So I can and I know how to do certain kinds of things well. So I have a client I'm working with who's an actress. She knows how to go in there, hit her mark, do all the things you're supposed to do to get hired. But one of the things that's in the way is showing up in a way that really allows more of the human expression to come through her. That's what I would call the artistry. And that's what she's looking to develop, because that will make her more interesting in other ways. You could still call that craft. So it kind of depends who you are and who you're talking to. But not every painting ends up in the Met. And that's because a lot of times, while they know how they have the skill and have the draftsmanship, there was nothing new about it. There was nothing that was different. There was nothing that was being added to. And not everybody cares about doing that. Some people just want to do the work of the craft. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And you need to understand and value both. I think when you have a vocabulary that helps you separate them, whatever they are for you, and they might be slightly different definitions, it helps you locate yourself where you are in the marketplace. The marketplace is often looking for the craftsperson who will sell. I want to find the person who I can put in this position who's going to help me sell the thing I'm trying to sell.
Right.
That's what the marketplace wants. But if you're like, I have something to say and I have a message and I have what I want to come through my work, that might be different. You might want a different path, and that might not lead you as far into the business because there's not going to be necessarily the same audience for it, or it's never been created before. That's a whole different conversation. And so people are different in different conversations with the marketplace, depending on how they position themselves.
Wow, that blows me right there, because there's so many people that are great at what they do. They're great craftsmen.
Yeah.
They are master craftsmen. But if you were to ask them to do something from scratch, I'm gonna go off on a small tangent. I have a friend. I guess I would consider him a craftsman. He's an actual, I guess, craftsman. His job is to fix broken, like wood stuff. Like essentially works at, I don't even know where he works at, what kind of does this, but they get things like desks, chairs, like nice bedroom pieces, like that have the drawers and everything, like the entire sets. And when they have chips, like if you were moving something, like and you were moving to a different place, and like the movers accidentally like chipped off a corner or something and everything like that, he does like the actual fixing of like crown molds and all that kind of like detailed stuff. But I don't know that if you were to actually ask him to build his own from scratch unique desk, that would be something that could be done. And I think that that's where, from what I'm hearing, is where a differentiator between the craftsman and the artist take place. Like the artist is someone that can take everything that he knows and from scratch give you something. The craftsman says, this is how something's done, and I am best at this. And so a craftsman is best at taking something that's probably broken or was not done well and then doing it better. Whereas an artist is someone that says, we're going to take something that it does not exist. Like it's not broken. It's not, perfect. It's just not there. And we're going to bring it from scratch to all the way into real life. And I really think that's a key point, because as you said, each person has their different skills. If the craftsman were to bring something from to life, it's not going to be as well, because there's no innovativeness, there's no originality, there's no creativity. This is what's supposed to happen, so this is what I did.
Which doesn't mean that they can't do it from scratch, but it means that they're doing it not necessarily in a new way. They're doing it in the way they know their craft really well. So we think about the people who are, making a car. Now, some people might say this is really an art. Maybe creating a Tesla felt like an art to someone. So I don't know. And I think that's not an easy place to land. And we don't tend to think of it that way. But where's the human spirit coming through? And to what extent is your work about the human expression of human spirit and innovation and creativity, like you said? And where is it about creating something solid and well made or well presented or well put together? And we really like when it's both. The people who we really like to celebrate in their crafts are people who can do both. People who are excellent musicians, who can riff on their guitars like nothing else, or improv their jazz stuff crazy. They're good at it. They're amazing. They impress us. It's different. We listen to it. We're moved. That's the craftsperson and the artist, and those are the people that we tend to, but they didn't get there because they were an artist alone or a craftsperson alone. They got there because they also knew how to market and how to position themselves in the market and how to stay there and not give up. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, the myth that I grew up with was you have it or you don't. So how long are you going to give this to Leah until you give up? Well, if I'm in for it, I don't give up. If I'm in to be an actress, and what I learned was, and I look back, I made choices. I made the choice not to go out of town, and I never was fully in an audition that was for something out of town because I wanted to live with my husband. And I was helping to support us while he was in school. And I never made and when I was getting something that was a higher level, was actually one of the, really good stepping stone for me. It conflicted with a friend's wedding. I wanted to go to the wedding. I didn't want to have to miss weddings to do shows. So I was willing to say no to the show in order to go to the wedding. Later in life, I was like, oh yeah. So when I say, oh, I really wish I could have, it's not necessarily true. I wish I could have, and on all the things that were also important to me. But I wasn't willing to say no to everything else to just do that.
Right.
And that's the other thing that I think is it's really about your commitment and how are you in it. And when your parents, to go back to the original question, when your parents see that you are surviving, you're finding a way to live, and you're serious, and you're starting to move forward, just as your confidence builds, their confidence builds, their fears subside. But when they're trying to stop you, it's out of fear. And they're trying to protect you from the life that they're afraid that you might have. So you have to show them, I can handle this because this is what I'm committed to. Here's what I'm willing to do for it. Here's how I'm making a living. Here's how I'm sharing a room with a bunch of people in a place that don't worry, it's kind of safe. We're okay. This is how we handle it. Or this is where we're going to live. This is what we're going to do. And when you lead in that direction and approach your life like you're the leader in your life and not like you need someone else's approval to go do it, the people around you fall into place. The ones who don't belong start to separate from you a little bit, and the others who are really on your side fall with you and root for you because they care about seeing you succeed. And if you fail, they might say, see, you should. That's their fear. You take that and you say, thank you for caring so much. Thank you for being afraid on my behalf, that you care so much for me. And you take that with you and you move forward. You don't have to take in all the rest.
It's about
you don't have to allow everyone else to spare.
I think we've had an amazing conversation over the past, roughly hour and a half at this point, I think.
It's quite a bit. Yeah.
I've really loved this conversation. And I usually end on some kind of like, what would you, give to the next generation and everything like that. But I want to have something specific to this particular conversation.
Okay.
What is the moment of forgiveness for you? So when you realize my parents are doing this out of love, they're not saying it because they're trying to stop me. They're not doing this out of a hate in their heart. They're not doing it because they don't want to see me shine.
Mm.
When you're an artist, or when any person is giving you a negative feedback or anything of that nature, what is your truth, I guess, if you will? Like, how do you find, when you say, or when you, as you say, go all in, what do you mentally do to prepare for that kind of, to being all in? Because you're going to get the, as you said, the people worrying about you. And if they're listening to this particular episode, they're going to realize that, it's only because they care about me. But it doesn't necessarily negate the fact that they said those things, and it can still feel some kind of way. So what is the preparation and understanding that, it's out of love?
Yeah.
Or whatever it's out of.
The greatest shield to protect you is love, and love for yourself and for the others. So when you walk around with a bubble of love around you, and I know can sound a little corny, nothing else really penetrates, because everyone is willing to receive love. So if you show up and you're smiling and you're loving your parents, that's when they're receiving from you. You feel better because you gave that. So to answer though, for me, I cannot remember a specific moment in the way Octavio does. He describes it. He's driving in the car. Is a process, and my whole life is an evolution. The thing I could say is you can get a coach, and the coach can help you prepare and be there. But the other thing is, it's really connected into your deep self. When you accept you, it's you then when other people don't, you don't take it personally. You have to realize it's never about you. 80 plus something percent of what people say is not about you. When you can trust yourself and you can find that peace within yourself, and it's not as hard to find as we think. It's that quiet space between the breaths. It's that connected, that knowing, when we really know. When we say, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. That means there's something in us that knows what we value, that knows what we care about. When we listen to that voice and we connect with what's really true inside, we can handle a lot more of what comes out around us. When we don't know it and we're trying to live by other people's truths to get the approval, which is how I lived for a long time, how to get their approval, how to succeed in the ways that have been told what success looks like. I mean, I did it and I didn't do it. So, but when we live that way, we're not being true to ourselves. So anything that somebody says upsets us. But when there's truth, I'll share with you the exact story that I started to allude to before. In my last year as the director of education in a congregation nearby, I had a child who was Pacific Islander ethnicity, grew up in a Jewish home, come out as trans, male, and a ninth grader, I think. I think he was a ninth grader at the time. And that is one of the most endangered, that's the most vulnerable is the word I'm looking for, trans or LGBT population to come out. My job, the way I saw it, was to make sure that child felt safe. And when that child comes to me and says, I don't feel safe because people from this community were at my school, and when they saw me dressed as my feminine gender, they looked at me really strange. And so now I feel really uncomfortable coming here. And I said, well, is that how you identify now? Okay, we have to make you feel safe. And I immediately put things in place to make that child feel safe. So when the president of the synagogue, who I was more socially conservative than I realized, or than previous synagogues, told me that I needed to now put everything that I planned on hold and tell that child that it was all going to wait, I told him I couldn't do that. I gave some other alternative suggestions, and I said, but if that's what you want, you lead and I will follow. And I got an email the next day that said, somewhere along the line, you forgot who works for whom. But my internal compass wasn't going to change and wasn't going to back down, because that child was watching me. Other children were watching me. Other teachers were watching me. And they know I stand for them. And governance, that's their issue. If they think there's a governance issue, there's politics around that, that's for them. But he took it personally and he became irate. He got pushed. He did. I told him he had to do it himself, that I'd follow. But he took that like terribly. So he told everybody we were postponing the training that I'd set up. The students, the teens were very upset, and half of them already knew. And most of them knew more about trans than he did. And parents were pushing back, saying this wasn't okay. And this was also going into the Trump election. So there's a lot of things going back and forth that make each side have a little bit more heated. And I'm not interested in sides. I'm interested in making this child feel safe and being in community. And there was fallout from that, and I did lose my job eventually. I think the president felt like he was taking me down a notch, but I never stopped holding my head up because nothing made me feel like he could take me down a notch. And I had a friend that summer who I was telling him what happened, and the vulnerability was still all there. And he said to me, you know, you might go back and think about the things you could have said. And I have. And I have grown my skills so much by thinking of how many ways I could have led the president through that in a different way. But you will never regret the stance you took. And the thing is that was true. I could live with myself because I was entirely in my own alignment. So what I would leave you with is this image of a rocket. A rocket, in order to soar into space, needs to be in alignment. Think of the tip as the goals, and the fuel is your why. What's the meaning and the purpose? And everything in between are the actions that you take. If they are aligned with your values and your actions, and you have a straight rocket and you're fueled by your why, you're going to go up and you're going to soar, and no one's going to be able to stop you. But when you're out of alignment, you're kind of doing this for this person, but you're kind of doing it for that person, but it doesn't all feel right to you. You value this, but you're not quite behaving that way. You're crisscross like this, and you're not going to really break the atmosphere. You're just going to burn, not get very far.
Right.
So that's the thing that I would say is find your alignment. When you live in your alignment and your truth, I can't say I wasn't comfortable that year. I can't say that it didn't hurt, that someone wanted to be angry and take me down. But my life was so much more than that. And it was everything else that I had going on in my life was way more meaningful. And basically it was time for me to leave. It was totally in alignment for me to leave. I had overstayed. I had outgrown that position, and I was just there because it was convenient.
Wow. That's something big. I think you've really provided a lot of value for a lot of people from a lot of different groups in this particular episode, especially this particular segment. So what I like to do is, before we always head out, absolutely shameless plug. Let us know where we can find you on social media, your website, how we can book you. If someone feels that they want to have a conversation with you, where can they find you at?
Well, as you know, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. And Leah Zimmerman, and there aren't a lot of Leah Zimmermans living in Claremont, California, so that's one of the ways to identify me, or with the silver hair. But one of the things that I offer is I have a freebie I call 4 Steps to Reduce Stress. And now I'm thinking I did not prepare myself the link, so I can't give it.
No, send me the link and I'll put it.
I'll send you the link. You can put it in the notes. And my website is steppingstoolcoaching.com. But I think the best way, if people are listening and there's something that resonates with them and they just want to have a chat, that thing you said, can I ask you about that? Because that really resonated for me. Just email me, steppingstoolcoaching@gmail.com, and introduce yourself.
steppingstoolcoaching@gmail.com.
Yep. And just say, hey, I heard you on Angela's podcast, and that thing you said, I have a question, or can you tell me more about that? Or thank you, or this resonated. You don't have to have something to say or an inquiry, but it's a way to reach me and be in touch and just start a chat and a relationship. Wow. If I can help people outside beyond where I am, that would, for me, it's all about impact. How many lives can we change by having these conversations?
That's amazing. I'm glad that we had you on this episode, and I'm glad that we had this talk and everything. Like, I personally, I love when I hop on a podcast and I feel changed. Like, I feel like I'm able to learn something. I've taken so much from this podcast, from, you know, the personalness of your father, because he is exactly like my dad. And I don't know if it's a thing for dads at that particular time, but
we could talk about that another time. But why dads sometimes show up the way they do in a control or authoritarian stance, because I'm going to tell you, my dad doesn't think about himself that way. And I'm not sure he even remembers that. My dad is a very tender.
Oh my gosh. Listen, we have to stop that, because I will go into a full rabbit hole discussion about, you know, what their version of, you know, everything was. But that's a completely different story for, you know.
We could put that on hold and we can have that conversation another time.
Absolutely. But thank you so much, Leah, for coming to join us. We absolutely loved having you today. And definitely steppingstoolcoaching@gmail.com, steppingstoolcoaching.com. Go check her out if you have any kind of resonation with what was said today. She is the person to talk to and have that with. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Hey Ramblers, that's it. Podcast is over. Don't leave yet though. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast, and follow us on YouTube at OffSource HQ. We'll see you next time.